thanks for joining for an episode of the TechSpective Podcast. I have Raghu Nandakumara from Illumio. If you want to introduce yourself, give a little bit of background, and let us know what we're going to talk about.
Sure. Tony, firstly, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I am Raghu Nandakumara, VP of Industry Strategy at Illumio, the breach containment company. And our focus is helping our customers boost their cyber resilience by addressing the problem of lateral movement risk, which is exactly what attackers exploit to spread around in their target environment and cause havoc. And we enable them to reduce this risk through the market-leading segmentation offering and a detection response capability that allows them to quickly identify lateral movement risk and take the necessary containment actions. So we have two products, segmentation and insights, that do those things. And together they help our customers reduce lateral movement risk, contain attacks, and boost cyber resilience. And excited to be here today to talk about some exciting data that we have from a recent survey and discuss all things related to that. So, Tony, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And I've talked with and worked with Illumio off and on for a number of years, and so I realize that both the threat space it continues to evolve, as does Illumio. Like back when I would say, well, yeah, it's just you do microsegmentation. That's what it's what you do. But things change, and so, now we've there's a lot going on with. Everyone likes to talk about alert fatigue. I mean, we've been talking about alert fatigue for eons, and there are. I mean, this is like a off topic, really, almost. But I feel like there are certain things that we have just been talking about as an industry forever. Like we talk about alert fatigue, and it seems like every few months someone comes out with a thing where they say, "Hey, alert fatigue is bad." So we came out with this new thing, and yet 6 months from now we're still talking about alert fatigue. It's like, okay, well, did we fix it or not? Same thing with like the skills gap and the employment gap, and it's like, because that's a whole separate thing where I'm like those two things, it doesn't jive. Like, you can't tell me that there's millions of unfilled jobs if I can go on LinkedIn and I can find you 10,000 people who are looking for a job.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, let's come back to security alerts and alert fatigue. Share your thoughts on that.
Sure. So look, firstly, I think it is a fact that we have more and more security tools in our stack, and they're all generating events all the time. So yes, there is absolutely a overwhelming and increasing number of alerts that security teams consume into their, let's say, their SIEM platforms, their security platforms, that they in some way need to process and analyze day to day, right? And I think it's safe to say also that the number of alerts that we're going to generate is only going to increase as not only do we, let's say, consume more security tools, but we just have more things that can just generate events and generate alerts. And I think there is now a fine line between what is a security event and what is an event, right? So potentially anything is a security event, right? So I think there's a fine line there. So like to say, yes, there is alert fatigue, it can sound trope, but I think the important thing is really around putting that into context. Right. So what do we mean? Like, why is alert fatigue a challenge? Well, because if you then think about the fact is, what is the impact of not being able to process all of these alerts? Well, on the one side, the fatigue comes from, well, I kind of know that a lot of these alerts, the vast majority of alerts, are thankfully sort of essentially, what's the word for it? I can safely, in inverted commas, ignore them, right? Because it's just alerts on things that I just expect to happen in my environment. I know that they're not bad. But equally, at the same time, you have this sort of this contradiction, because you know the majority of those things are not bad, but equally, you also know that you can't just safely ignore everything, because you don't want to be that organization that ignores the one bad thing and that turns into a significant event.
Like that, right? Was like one of the takeaways of the target breach was. Exactly. They had alerts. they had a bunch of alerts. They just kind of went, yeah, that's just an alert.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I think that Target is one example, and there are multiple examples through history where it is the missing of something significant, essentially something slipping through the net that results in that catastrophic incident. So organizations have this challenge: is that how do I identify the real problem from this essentially that proverbial needle in the haystack? So the challenge is sort of identify, we know we're going to have a sea of alerts. How do I identify the things that are most important? And part of that is understanding, having a better understanding of events, better context over events, so that you can differentiate between a better ability to differentiate between good and not so good. But then also, it's once you've got that identification, the other thing coupled to it is being able to then have a prescriptive set of actions that say, okay, this is the best set of actions that you could take to address this particular type of alert, right? Because one thing is finding that event. Right. So we've got the data that shows that 92% of organizations have experienced security issues due to missed alerts, and it takes 12.1 hours to detect an issue caused by a missed alert. So that's a significant issue. But also, once you've detected that, it's having the right actions that we need to take, or the best set of actions, so that we can address it quickly. So we always talk about sort of mean time to detect. We want to reduce the mean time to detect so we can detect bad things more quickly. But then also we want to reduce our mean time to respond, right? So that we're not spending a lot of time, once we detected the bad thing, we're not spending a lot of time, or spending less time ideally, to take the most appropriate response. So this is kind of really the problem and what we're trying to solve for.
Okay. Well, so the first part I was thinking, we call it alert fatigue for a security analyst, but it's what all we're really saying is you've been assigned more than you can handle. We're calling it alert fatigue, but it's really just an overwhelming amount of work. It's like if someone told me, "Hey, Tony, I need you to write 25 articles today." I'm okay. Well, now I've got article fatigue, but to your point, it's like, okay, well then my next task would be to look at the 25 articles and say, okay, now I need to prioritize these. I know I can only do 10. Let's say I can crank out 10 articles today. Which 10 are the 10 priority articles out of these 25? So that's one bit. All we're really saying is it's overwhelming.
Right.
And to your point about, okay, well, it's overwhelming, but the vast majority of it is also semi-meaningless.
Yes.
And on the one hand, you feel like, yeah, I could probably it's meaningless. I don't care about that. But you can't fully ignore it, because then when the proverbial stuff hits the fan and someone comes back and says, well, you had all these alerts, why didn't you do something? Then now you're putting your own head on the guillotine. I feel like, I've spent 2 years doing interviews and podcasts and stuff and talking about AI and generative AI and then moving on to agentic AI and obviously there's everyone's got a use case for AI, and a lot of them, may not pan out. Like a lot of them may be pipe dreams. But I will say that consistently, security analysts, like this work, this like level 1 SOC analyst activity, is something where I'm like, well, yes, this makes perfect sense. Like, even if I don't even need magic generative or agentic AI for this. This is just a machine learning problem to say, hey, I have all this noise. What are the telltale signs that tell me this noise deserves more attention? Let me filter all this stuff over here. I mean, and we've been doing that for years. Now we've got AI, and now we've got agentic AI, and I've said this on past podcasts, and I'm still sticking with it, that I see agentic AI as, from a SOC analyst perspective, as delivering on the promise of what we wanted SIEM and SOAR to be 10, 15 years ago. That, like, the whole idea was, hey, you have all these alerts all over the place. Let's aggregate them. It's like, okay, well, now I've got the same number of alerts. They're just coming from one tool. Like you didn't solve anything. Now I have 10,000 alerts. I only have to look at one screen, but I still have the same number of alerts. And then SOAR was supposed to be like, okay, well, what if we automated responding to those things? But I feel like we weren't really there yet. Like SOAR had potential, like we knew what we wanted to do, but the technology wasn't really there for us to really trust it, and it required too much hand-holding and too much manual effort still to try and figure out, okay, well, what am I going to automate? And so there was a lot of manual effort in that automation. And now I feel like agentic AI can actually deliver on some of this. We can start to offload and say, hey, look, I don't want to just ignore all of these, because somewhere, and this is actually one of the reasons I feel like this really delivers on it, is AI is very good at looking at this overwhelming number of alerts, just all these alerts, and being able to do pattern recognition, being able to say, where I might look at it and go, oh, well, that's 10,000 alerts of mundane, who cares? But the AI can process it at a much grander scale than I can, and much faster. And it might say, okay, yes, this all looks like nothing, but if I connect this dot with this dot, there's something there. And so I feel like agentic AI is actually uniquely qualified to do that job.
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of, I completely agree with everything that you've laid out there, and I think the comparison with sort of or the promise that was originally put forth by SIEM and SOAR tools it is kind of where we're moving towards now. But I think tying back to, you use the analogy of, I've got 25 articles to write, I need to prioritize. Security teams are dealing with 2,000 alerts per day on average. And so that's roughly an alert every 42 seconds, which means that in the time that you've probably gone in your SIEM and clicked on an event and just read through it, you've probably generated another 1 or 2 events have come into the queue, right? So you're kind of always playing catch up. And I think and as you said, right, I think the way you described sort of splitting up this into one part of it is kind of like a machine learning and a correlation problem, right? And the second part of it is something that is much more attuned to agentic and agentic AI and generative AI. And I think of this in 3 ways that these capabilities combine to really kind of turbocharge like SOC or sort of essentially incident response, or I can say a right of boom capabilities, right? Sort of in terms of just like the application of like machine learning and correlation. And I kind of touched on this earlier in the conversation, which is one of the challenges that SOC teams have and incident response teams have with alerts is alerts very often lack sufficient context sufficient metadata around the alert to allow someone to look at that alert and quickly sort of build a picture of what that alert is about, right? So this is where the application of machine learning, of sort of correlation capabilities, etc., would allow essentially. I call this like adding, like coloring in the picture a bit more, right? Or filling in the gaps, whatever you want to use as your analogy. That this is really where you can use your models and train essentially those models trained on all of your historical data, right? Additional context about the environment, and as you're ingesting in those events, these models can apply that additional sort of the adding of that context, right? So I think that's kind of one very specific use of whether it's ML or AI or more general AI models to help with the problem of understanding alerts. The next piece is, again, dealing with that, finding the needle in the haystack, right? Getting over the actual sort of processing of events to identify what is most important. That, I think, is another great application of AI capabilities. Again, right, being able to analyze the event both in isolation, but also in sort of comparison to the universe of events, to say, okay, this, based on everything that I know, right, and that could be looking at events from a particular tool or correlating events from multiple tools, right, to build a complete picture to say, based on everything that I understand, all the behavior in this environment, this is a true critical event that you need to go and prioritize, right? Essentially putting that to the top of the queue, right, versus this I know is a false positive, etc. Right? That, I think, is another great efficiency driver that we're going to see. And the third distinct application of AI, and this is kind of and this could be very much an agentic AI, right, combined with sort of with some generative capabilities as well, is then saying, okay, right, is then around, okay, with the persona that is looking at these events, what is the most appropriate action that should be taken to address it, right? Because again, right, when we talk about security events, we've got to be conscious that there are different personas in a security team, right? There is the SOC analyst, there is the threat hunter, there is the incident responder, there is the security leader, CISO, or whatever that title is, right? There could be compliance, and all of these personas have a different perspective on, like, events mean different things to them, particularly in terms of what the actions that they're driving, right? So if you've now got AI agents that are essentially, each agent represents a particular persona, they're then able to process that data set, your event set, perform the analysis, right? And then throw out what is most relevant for that persona, both in terms of the events that are most relevant to them, but also the actions that they should be taking to address that, right? So now what you see is you've got something that is addressing, you're using AI to address the problem of understanding. You're using AI to address the problem of finding the needle. And you're using AI to solve the problem, or at least provide guidance in what should I do next, right? And you can see how these things together provide a much better understanding and a much quicker and targeted response and detection and response.
All right. Well, yeah, so as you were talking, something occurred to me as well. Traditionally, level one SOC analyst is an entry level job. Someone's coming into the security field. We say, hey, we're gonna throw you in here. your job is going to be to like sift through this overwhelming amount of alerts and figure out what to escalate to level 2. So that means there's a learning curve. That means that someone's coming into this field and they've got to figure out, okay, well, what is anomalous, and what should I escalate to level 2, and what should that look like? And to the point you just made, like, how would I share that with the level 2 SOC analyst versus how would I share that with the CISO versus how would I share that with the head of compliance? Like, I'm taking the same information, and now I started in this job last week. I'm looking at 25,000 alerts, and now I have to figure out how to distill this information. So what occurred to me was, this is another area where the reason that agentic AI is the answer for this, and I'm not here to be the cheerleader for agentic AI. Like, I don't think it's the magic solution for everything, but I do feel like it's uniquely suited for this, because what it means is your entry level, your level 1 is no longer an entry level role. The agentic AI is literally an expert at level 1. Like, that is their career. They're not gonna go on to level 2. They're not gonna become, they're not gonna go up the chain and become the CISO. Literally, what they do is level 1 SOC analyst all day, every day, and they're expert at it.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And we all know that, particularly those, like, a lot of those level 1 functions are very, very prescriptive, very playbook based in terms of how they execute that function, right? And really, as you become more experienced in that role, your experience allows you to execute that playbook more efficiently. But this is a great example of how we can essentially train the agentic AI on that playbook, on that level 1 playbook. And as it essentially learns, it is itself getting more optimal, right? It is improving its own process. And yeah, I absolutely agree. This is a great use case for agentic AI. Like, persona-based applications are pretty much what sort of like agentic AI is really being designed for.
Yeah. I mean, on a grander scale, like outside of security itself or the SOC, I would say, when I look at where to use AI, I'd say, okay, pretty much every job has some mundane, routine task that you feel like is a waste of your time. Like, that you're doing it because it's a requirement of the job, and you're like, okay, but I should be doing something better. Like, and instead I'm filling out this form. Like, what? This is dumb. Those are the things you give to agentic AI. Because if it's mundane and routine, that's what AI is great at. Like, it doesn't have to think outside the box. It's like, no, all I need to do is take this information, put it into this form, deliver it to this person. Like, I can offload that. But coming back to your thing about the role based, I was going to say, one of the things too that I think is kind of crucial here is, people in general, at least outside of technology, outside of security, I think of agentic AI, and I'm guilty of propagating this myth. Think of agentic AI as like Jarvis from Iron Man or whatever. Like, it's an all-encompassing. It knows everything about you. It knows all the information in the world. It is there to be your personal executive assistant and help you with everything across the board. The reality is, it makes more sense to have an army of AIs that have specific roles. So to your point, instead of having an agentic AI that is your level 1 SOC analyst that is just like, okay, I know all the things. It's like, okay, well, what if you have one that like is the agentic AI proxy for the CISO, the agentic AI proxy for the compliance manager, the agentic AI proxy for the level 2 analyst, or like, and when you break it down that way, it's like, oh, well, now it's got a very specific role, and it can evolve and be expert at that thing, because trying to be expert at all the things in the world isn't possible.
No, I think that's a really important point, right? Because, and I think it really does shift the way individuals, organizations should be thinking about the applicability of AI within each of their organizations. Because, of course, right, I think we are in some way tricked by sort of the usefulness of the more general purpose, like AI tools like ChatGPT, etc. And we commonly assume that, oh, right, when we're talking about using AI within whatever, let's say in security, where it's really about some kind of interface with ChatGPT to make things. No, absolutely not, right? And in fact, if we were to take that route, it would actually result in horrible inefficiencies, right? And horrible cost of being able to train models to behave in the way that we do them, because those are very much general purpose models, right? So when we're talking about agentic AI, in many ways, it's really no different if we think about sort of the human skill set within any team, right? You have often some generalists, right? But often you have specialists in roles. And that's exactly because they're the folks who have knowledge like a mile deep, right? Or miles deep into the particular area that they have focused on. And that's really, when we're talking about agentic AI, that's how that's the opportunity, right? It's to create agents that sort of represent in some way that same level of sort of human expertise deep in particular areas that can then provide real value in being able to offload some of those repetitive tasks, right? That if we're able to make those efficient, then essentially the human expertise, right? Which, as we know, and those of us who are sort of more realist than the fear mongers, know that there is always going to be a very important role for the human expertise to play in a lot of these functions. So it's just being essentially big, to your point, is to making the humans more productive, right? By enabling the agentic AI to do a lot of that sort of lower level heavy lifting.
Right. Well, so I'm going to make 2 points that, like, anyone who regularly listens to the podcast will be like, yeah, you've said that before. Why do you keep saying that? And really, it's because as far as I know, my wife might be the only person who regularly listens to the podcast. So so I'm not going to assume that anyone listening to the podcast has listened before. So there are 2 things. Number one, I was going to say the analogy you just gave. The one that I've used over the last year or so is healthcare, where I say, if I go to my family doctor, he is the general practitioner. He knows a little bit about a lot of things. But as soon as he runs into a problem, he says, "Oh, you got a shoulder thing. I need to send you to an orthopedist. Oh, you've got a, I'm going to send you to a cardiologist. I'm going to send you to a neurologist." Like, there are experts in specific fields, but you go see the general practitioner first, and then he looks at it and says, "Okay, go talk to them. And then they offload you to the experts. And someone who's a cardiologist, they're so focused on being a cardiologist that they've forgotten all the other stuff they learned in med school. Like, they're just a cardiologist. So I've used that example of, like, that's how it works. Like, ChatGPT is the general practitioner. It knows a little bit about a lot of things. But if you want to go deep, you need to find an AI that is trained to be deep in what you're in what you're trying to do. The other thing I was going to say is, and I made this point a while back when someone was talking. This is the more early days of generative AI, early days of ChatGPT. I feel like the sentiment has evolved where more companies and people are like, "Oh, okay, well, this is a tool we can use." But initially there was a lot more backlash of, like, "Well, that's cheating and that's blah blah blah, and nobody should be doing that." you should do your job. Stop offloading your job to ChatGPT. And I said, you know what though, when I look at a CEO, the CEO has other C's in the C-suite, and every one of those C's in the C-suite has an executive assistant, maybe a chief of staff, and all of those people have teams. And it's like,
yeah.
The using AI just means that I, as Joe employee, can also have a team, because the CEO is not an oracle. The CEO is not superhuman. The CEO doesn't know things that you don't know. They don't. I mean, maybe some things, but in general, they don't have access to the more stuff. It's just that they have a team of people who go do specific roles and tasks for them. And then all of that is brought up, and then the CEO can look at it all and make an informed decision based on that information. It's like, okay, well, why can't I use agentic AI to do the same thing for my role?
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And that's exactly how, from an Illumio perspective, when we're looking at essentially the problem set that we operate in, which is around helping, as I said right at the top, helping our customers address the problem of lateral movement risk. We looked at this from that lens and said, okay, what can we do? How can we best leverage AI capabilities to deliver that value in this problem set that we operate in? And I know that we've spoken to you previously about sort of Illumio Insight, which is our detection and response capability focused on lateral movement risk. And then kind of as part of this, we've now enabled this Illumio Insights agent capability that does exactly all the things that I've been describing so far, which is the sort of the adding context as kind of part of the core use of AI that we have in the platform, but being able to identify on a persona by persona basis, identify the most relevant lateral movement risks, lateral movement related events for a particular persona, and report it in the most relevant way, and bubble that up, right? So that they can go and focus there to then drive their next set of actions, and providing them with the actions that they need to take, and the why, right? Explaining, okay, the reason we're saying this is the most relevant thing is because we have seen these behaviors and they align to the following sort of tactics used by known threat actors, right? And here is the things that are impacted in your environment. Here are the actions that we recommend that you take, again, based on your particular persona, that will help you address this risk, or help you report this in the most relevant way possible. That's exactly what we're bringing to our customers. Again, all aligned with helping them detect threats more quickly and respond more quickly.
Okay. It's funny. I've been doing this long enough to watch this evolution of when I was on the security side of things, before switching teams, I was doing managed antivirus and stuff, and so I'm from the perimeter defense days, and we went from firewalls and antivirus to detection and response, to someone saying, hey, look, no matter how good your firewall is, no matter how good your antivirus is, something is going to get through. You need to be able to detect it and respond. And that made sense. It's like, yes, there is no perfect defense, and something is going to get through. So yes, we should be able to detect and respond. But then we kind of shifted too far that way. And it's like, okay, well, you still should be doing the firewall and the antivirus too. Yes, we can all agree that the perimeter is gone, yada, yada, yada. But to the extent that you can, you still want to guard the perimeter, and you want to detect and respond, and to where in the last few years, I think it's evolved to this recognition of, okay, yes, you do need both of those things, and when we put it all together, now we're going to call it cyber resilience. Now we're going to say, really, what you're trying to do is, yes, you want to block, you can block. Yes, you want to detect and respond to what you can detect and respond to. But ultimately, your overall objective is resilience. Your overall objective is, how do I ensure the business continues during an attack? How do I ensure there's minimal blast radius and impact from an attack? That's the goal. And so I think cybersecurity at this point kind of boils down to risk mitigation and cyber resilience.
Yeah, no, totally right, and we're completely aligned with that. And that's exactly when we're talking about breach containment. It's really around kind of like the acknowledgement that cyber attacks are increasing day to day, and at some point the attacker is going to find a way to make that initial intrusion. Right, they're going to find a way onto the target environment. So really, how you should be thinking about how you build defenses, and of course, right, prevention. If you can prevent an attack, amazing, right? Prevention is super important. But knowing that, like, at some point, that prevention capability is gonna let one slip through the net. You also need to prioritize how you're going to limit the movement, limit the spread of that one that slips through the net, right? And this could be a proactive deployment of capabilities like segmentation, like microsegmentation, to limit that spread so that they get in and they're kind of boxed in, right? Because you're not giving them more access on the network than is necessary. But also that reactive, right? So it's a combination. It's a proactive capability, but also it's a reactive capability, so that when you detect something bad, you have the ability to instantly, essentially, put the gates in place, right? Pull the blinds down so that they can't get any further, right? So it's this combination that allows you to contain attacks, limit the spread of attacks quickly and efficiently, because you've got both a proactive and a reactive approach that ultimately, as you said, results in improved cyber resilience. And like, this is not just like vendor speak, but this is pretty much the language that regulators are using in regulations that they author day to day, right? It's organizations need to be able to contain the spread of inevitable cyber attacks to build better resilience.
Okay. This is a more of a forward-looking thing, like the different takes. I look at it, so taking what I just said about the evolution of cybersecurity as a whole. Like a few years back, I was first introduced to the concept of using like a security graph and doing, like, graph analysis of, and I thought that was magic, because I'm like, oh, because they were able to show me, like, okay, well, instead of saying, hey, you've got 10,000 vulnerabilities in your environment, you need to fix 10,000 vulnerabilities. We can graph this all out and show you how the dots connect, and say, well, if you just fix this dot, it fixes everything to the right of that dot. Like you've mitigated the whole thing, and like all that, we knew on a logic level before, but seeing it visually is impressive. But going from that to generative AI to agentic AI, when I play this out into the future, what I think is the segmentation of cybersecurity goes away. Like right now, we've got, this company does, breach simulation. This company does attack surface management. This company does vulnerability management. This company does, whatever. But I'm like, when you put it at a graph analysis level, and you involve agentic AI, and you say, okay, well, now I want all of the telemetry to come into, to funnel through one thing. I want to apply agentic AI to look at the whole thing. Like, I don't want to have 17 segmented tools. Ultimately, I think the 17 segmented tools are 17 agents. They're set, like I have an agent that does breach simulation. I have an agent that does attack surface management. I have an agent that does vulnerability management. And then at high level, I've got a tool that says, hey, I am the cybersecurity program. I do all of these things using these agents. But but the line between companies, I feel like the line is already blurring because companies are continuing to like expand what they do, and the Venn diagram of these different segments is just merging into a circle.
Yeah. So you spoke about a security graph, right? In this section, and the way I think about it is that every tool in your security stack, in some way or the other, provides either a dimension, I should say, probably a better way of thinking about it, a dimension in the security graph, or they are decorating the security graph in some way, right? So they're adding context to it, they're adding relationships to it, they're adding additional nodes and edges to this security graph, right? So the advantage is that if as an organization, right, what you're doing is that you're investing in tools and technologies that are complementary to each other. And by that, really what that will mean in the future is they're able to essentially write and update that same sort of common security graph, right? And that security graph essentially becomes the underlying data structure, right? Underlying model that your security organization essentially uses as a singular source of truth for your security posture, right? Because then, to your point, right, is that you could like you use the example of vulnerabilities, right? You could ask a question such as, if I have this vulnerability, right, and it's exploited, what does that mean from an exposure, right? And that just turns into a graph traversal problem. You start at the vulnerability layer, right? You sort of essentially find things that have that vulnerability, and then you traverse the graph from there. But equally, it could be a question around, okay, well, what is Tony's access to the estate, right? And that starts off by finding that node that represents Tony, right, and proceeding from there. So I do think that I don't think it's less about let's say eliminating tools per se, right? But I do think it is moving towards more and more like technologies that are able to integrate in this manner, and that will become sort of one of the deciding factors as organizations mature. It's, can I incorporate your technology into my security graph, right? So that it complements what I already have. And you've sort of got like the announcement from Microsoft from a few weeks ago, right, around sort of their relaunch of Sentinel as much more than just a theme, right? Very much as kind of what they see as the center of their security ecosystem, right? And foundational to that is essentially this security graph that they are maintaining and building within Sentinel, within the Sentinel data lake, right? So this is kind of what I see as the future. And then to your point around sort of then like AI agents operating on top of that graph, right? Based on their function, based on their persona, right? To take different actions, to perform different tasks.
Well, I would say that I feel like maybe where we're at or approaching is the end game, and it doesn't get to the vision I outlined. But I was going to say, like, even in the kind of the current state, as all of the tools embrace agentic AI, and you say, okay, well, I've got this breach simulation, it's got an agent. I've got attack surface management, it's got an agent. I've got and so it's like, even if they are separate tools and separate companies, well, now we're using MCP to be like, okay, well, now I need all of these agents to talk to each other. I need and then I can have a whatever, an overlying agent with, I don't know, maybe it is Microsoft, maybe it's CrowdStrike, maybe it's Palo Alto or whatever. Or like the overarching platform agent that says, okay, I'm going to direct all of these other agents, and I'm going to pull all the telemetry together so that we have a coherent, holistic view of the environment.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And I think that's that's still, I think, like that's kind of like the nirvana, right? And if we go back to the conversation like right at the top, and you sort of spoke about what sort of SIEM and SOAR were envisioned to be, I guess like 10 years ago or so, over the last 10 years, I think we are much closer to that state now, kind of as like as we've been discussing, and in some of the things that you just described, we're much closer to that point now about essentially a singular platform where all of these various kind of disparate data sources can be analyzed, correlated, right? And then an appropriate action be taken on them.
Okay. Well, okay. So with the insights agent and automating, kind of SOC analysis, et cetera, and all everything we just talked about, how do you see Illumio's role evolving? As agentic systems become more common across the security stack, not just detecting threats, but making decisions in collaboration, with human analysts and whatever. Like, how does that play out over the next few years for Illumio?
Yeah, I think again, right, it goes back to sort of like what is our mission, right? Our mission is to ensure that essentially disasters don't become cyber attacks don't turn into disasters, or breaches don't turn into disasters, right? And making that possible through containment, right, everywhere. So, and we are obviously from a technical perspective, or if you want to think about like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, we firmly operate in addressing the tactics of discovery and lateral movement. So we will, like, our aim is to continue to focus on that and give our customers the best set of tools that help them understand what they have in their environment, how those things interact, and put in place the most relevant sort of controls through segmentation to address to reduce their lateral movement risk. So we will continue to innovate in that space, and that'll, of course, that there's a number of things associated with that, right? That could be extended coverage across sort of pretty much every type of resource that exists today in today's hybrid multi-cloud environment. So this is beyond just like sort of traditional sort of compute and virtual machines and endpoints, right? Of course, clouds and cloud resources, PaaS, OT, IoT type device, essentially the whole lot, right? So that's kind of, but then tied into that, what are sort of the other key areas that make up sort of that complete that ecosystem, right? Because lateral movement is ultimately sort of traversing the network, right? But in order to do that, there are other things that would have been exploited, compromised, etc., right, to ultimately enable that lateral movement. So how do we play in that? How do we bring that additional information into our platform to, again, ensure that what we're providing to our customers gives them best information to make the best decisions to protect their environment?
Okay. All right. I don't have any other questions. I mean, I think this is a great conversation. I think if I was to go back and like listen to the last 10, 20 podcasts, I feel like I say a lot of the same things, again, because I'm not sure anyone's following this serially, and and even when I write about it too, I actually just had this conversation recently where I was like, I feel like I'm writing so much about agentic AI, and I'll always somewhere in the intro I'm like explaining what agentic AI is. And I'm like, after the 10th or 20th article, like that seems kind of silly. Like, why am I continuing to explain what agentic AI is? And I'm like, well, it's because as a writer, I have to assume that maybe this is the first article you're reading of mine, and I can't just go on talking about things as if you already understand them. But at some point it does feel a little bit silly to keep saying the same things. But that said, I mean, I still think it's a great conversation. I love to talk with people and kind of get the feedback and I guess in a pat myself on the back way, like the validation of, okay, well, the way I'm thinking about this does make some sense, but also getting additional insight in like how I can refine what I'm thinking.
Yeah, look, I think totally. I think also I do sort of a lot of work in providing commentary, etc. And then we have our own podcast, and I agree. Sometimes it feels that we're repeating the same things, but I also absolutely echo the sentiment in that hearing it back, like in these conversations that we have, is validation that there is a sort of a consensus, right, in what the value is here, right, and how best to sort of capitalize on that to, again, right, build better cyber resilience, and that's definitely something that I hear and see consistently. So yeah, feel free to keep repeating it because I think it needs to be heard more and more.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and it was a great conversation.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for having us.